it up if you can, please. Because we shall not be moved.
Because our politics are trapped in the lies of scarcity. The lies of scarcity. And the lies of scarcity keep alive the lies of trickle-down economics and the lies of neoliberalism, which leave people out. And then when you add to that false, distorted forms of Christian nationalism and racism and militarism and climate devastation, you got a mess. These kind of politics turn us against each other. Blame the poor for their poverty, even though we live in the midst of abundance. And we know that poverty is not so much a personal choice as a political consequence of policy. We have the resources to meet the needs of everybody. The only thing we don't have enough of is moral consciousness and the will to do what's right. And that's our job, to shift the moral narrative of this nation. And let us always, when these pastors open up these congregations for justice movements, let us be thankful for them doing that. And let us thank right now this church and Pastor Jackson as he comes to tell us why even Trinity, this church and him, are mobilizing for June 18th. Thank you, Pastor.
Thank you, Reverend Barber. Thank you so much, and thank you all for coming here today to Trinity Church. You're going to use those phones, aren't you? You know, we're still Episcopalians. We struggle with that, but you know what, for this, you go ahead. You go ahead. You use them, you tweet them, you send it, you register, you register, you register. June what? 18th. June 18th. Now see, the word that caught me so strongly in the goals is register. See, I'm a native Chicagoan. And in Chicago, we vote. We vote what? Early and yeah, right. Then I came to New York, which is one of the unvotingest cities in the country. Did you know that? New York is one of the unvotingest cities in the country. Well, we got to up that because we've got a job to do on behalf of all people in this country. Now, I'm tempted to get preachy, but Reverend's going to get mad at me. I'm not. But I'm going to leave you with a little scripture, just a little scripture. You may know, you may have heard this one. Jesus is talking with a man. And the man says to him, what's the greatest commandment?
That's right.
Jesus says the greatest commandment, he says, love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your strength, with all your soul, with all your mind. And then he adds something on. Because the young man says, well, I've done all that all my life. And he says, Jesus says, and love who?
Your neighbor.
Your neighbor as yourself. As yourself. And the man says, well, who is my neighbor? And Jesus says, there was a Samaritan Jericho from Jerusalem. And you know the rest of the story, don't you? Because the neighbor is who? The other. Everyone. The man in need. The man who was hurt. The man who was down. The man who was beaten. The man who was injured. The man who needed help. Let us all never forget who our neighbor is. Our neighbor is he, she who need help. And in our country today, if you haven't noticed, we've got a lot of people that need help. So I thank you for coming to Trinity Church today. I thank you for being part of this movement. I thank you for the largeness of your hearts. I thank you for the generosity of your spirits. And I thank you for the way you care about our country, its people, and our land. On behalf of Trinity Church, welcome, and God bless you.
Thank you, thank you. Give it up. We want to ask now, keep this mic up for me, the tri-chairs from the New York State Poor People's Campaign Coordinating Committee. Come on, give it up for them.
Well, that's worth it all right there. Thank you so much. My name's Kelly Smith, and I could not be more proud or humbled to be part of this team, to be one of the tri-chairs of the New York State Poor People's Campaign. I was called to this work about 4 years ago. I was sick and tired of seeing the same struggles face my family, my community, my city, my state, my nation. I'm sick and tired of seeing people go without health care, with paying too much for health care that does nothing to cover us. I'm sick and tired of living in a city and a state that finds money for sports stadiums, can't find money for housing, can't find money for health care, while we sit in this beautiful church is violently evicting homeless camps around this city. I worry for my son. I worry that he'll be able to find a living wage. I worry that he lives in a world where his black skin is valued less than my white skin. And I could sit here and we could be sick and tired and frustrated, and I could worry and worry and worry and wring my hands. Or I could stand up, I could speak up, and I could fight. Reverend Barber, I often think of what you say. It has meant so much to me when you say if you knew this was your last breath, what would you do? How many of us have thought about that during this pandemic? If we thought this was our last breath, what would we do? Well, we are going to stand up, we are going to speak out, and we are going to fight, and we are going to mobilize for June 18th.
Good evening. I'm Reverend Wes McNeil. I am part of the Poor People's Campaign because early on in my life I felt a call to give my life to serving God. And based on what I read in the Bible and on the example of Jesus, I know that to be part of God's work in this world means taking the side of the poor and dispossessed and marginalized, and to join in the struggle against the forces of empire and domination. I'm part of this campaign because I'm angry. I'm angry that last week our governor and our legislature, like Kelly said, decided to give $600 million of our money to the Buffalo Bills, and at the same time said that we can't afford to give health care to everybody. We can't afford to pay home health care workers a living wage. We can't afford to fund our public education. And I'm also part of this movement because this campaign gives me hope. Because I know that the only way we're gonna win the transformative change that we need and deserve is if we come together across race and region, across gender, across our organizations and issues. And if we orient ourselves around the needs and demands of the 140 million poor and low-income people in this country and the billions more around the world. And so that's why I'm organizing and mobilizing for the Mass Poor People's Assembly and Moral March on Washington and to the polls on June 18th, and I hope that you will join me.
Assalamu alaikum. My name is Janelle Quay Hudson. I'm an artist and one of the tri-chairs of the New York State Poor People's Campaign. Members of this beloved community, we've gathered here today on this Moral Monday in New York City to tell the truth. In the heart of the financial capital of the world, people from various faith traditions and organizations have converged on Wall Street to demonstrate how a fusion movement works together to demand this country addresses the issue of poverty and provides true liberty and justice for all of God's children. I bear witness that the God of Abraham, Moses, Jesus, Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is one, and that God is just. And my faith, my iman, is what calls me into this movement to struggle for freedom and liberation. And the injustice that's being committed by the powerful, the arrogance and haughtiness by the most wealthy in this nation, the mistreatment of the poor is being recorded in a book. And I believe that God is going to judge each of us according to what we've done on this earth. And it's our job as believers, people submitted to God's will and followers of prophetic models of communication, to warn, to admonish, and to say to the leaders, as the prophets before us said, to Pharaoh, to Caesar, to the Quraysh, whoa, stop oppressing the poor. Stop your idol worship. Turn from your wicked deeds. Allah is the most forgiving, the most merciful. From Brooklyn to Queens, from Queens to Manhattan, from Manhattan to the Bronx, from the Bronx to Staten Island, from Staten Island to Buffalo, from Buffalo to Plattsburgh, to Albany, to Binghamton, from Binghamton to Hudson Valley, to Rochester. Poor people are rising up across the state of New York. And the New York State Poor People's Campaign is mobilizing, organizing, registering, educating, and engaging and energizing a mass poor people's low-wage workers assembly to descend on Washington on June 18th as we make our voice heard that we are more than a moment, we are a movement, and inshallah you'll see New York on June 18th. Forward together!
Today, we stand as truth tellers, witnessing to the pain and suffering caused by the injustices within our community and across this country. We gather to declare that we need a moral revival, a radical revolution of values. And we call on the prophets of old from sacred texts from the world's religions who proclaimed,
the believers, both men and women, are in charge of and responsible for one another. They all enjoin the doing of what is right and forbid the doing of what is wrong.
All the workers you have exploited and cheated cried out for judgment. The groans of the workers you use and abuse are a roar in the ears of God. James 5, verse 4.
The wisdom of the Bhagavad Gita teaches, Arjuna, whenever righteousness is on the decline, unrighteousness is in the ascendant, then I am reincarnated. For the protection of the virtuous, for the extirpation of the evildoers, and for the establishing of Dharma, righteousness, on a firm footing, I am born from age to age.
This is what the Lord says. Do what is just and right. Rescue from the hand of the oppressor the one who has been robbed. Do no wrong or violence to the immigrant, the children, or the widow, and do not shed innocent blood. Jeremiah 22:3.
55 years ago, Reverend Dr. King said, "There comes a time when silence is betrayal. The truth must be told."
And the truth is that nearly half the United States is poor or low income, and that more than 250,000 people die each year from poverty, the lack of education, and the lack of health care. The truth is that the pandemics of COVID-19, systemic racism, poverty, ecological devastation, and war hurt the poor first and worst.
We must break the silence of systemic racism, poverty, ecological devastation, and the denial of health care, militarism, and the war economy in our society. We must shift the false moral narrative of religious nationalism.
Somebody shout, lift from the bottom. So everybody rises. Now these gatherings we broadcast across the world, it is important, and the same thing is going to happen on June 18th. We're not going there so people can speak on behalf of folk. We're going there to build a stage for people to speak on their own behalf. And we know that folks' stories are much longer than 2 minutes. We do this because we're trying to maintain a time frame so people won't leave the live stream, because it's important that everybody gets it. But we've got some powerful, we call them testifiers. Now, they're not going to come in the tradition of testifying in church where you tell how good things are. They've got to testify to how bad things are. Because if we don't break the heart of this nation, we don't have a chance. Zora Neale Hurston said, if you smile while people are hurting you, they will kill you and say you enjoyed it. It's not easy for these testifiers to come and put themselves out, but they said they wanted to. We've asked them not to say, you know, I'm catching hell, but everything's fine. No, it's not fine. And somewhere we've got to be comfortable with saying it's not fine and stay there long enough. One of the great struggles I have, Dr. Jackson, Alvin, with the Christian church today is we run past Calvary so fast. But you got to stay there for a while. And this nation better stay here and see what it's doing to people and hear. So Jennifer E. Cuffey Wilson is coming to testify as an impacted person. Stephanie Helslop is coming to testify as an impacted person. Brenda Temple is coming to testify as an impacted person. Pamela Penatowski is coming to testify. And then Reverend Dr. Liz, our co-chair, will respond to the first testifiers. And then we have 3 more after this. I would ask the testifiers, as best you can, to just be mindful of the clock there in front of us. But like the Gettysburg Address, that wasn't but 2 minutes, but it changed the country. Give your best from your heart.
everybody. My name is Jennifer E. Huffy Wilson, and I'm from the Shinnecock Indian Nation. I'm Shinnecock Montauk. And we live out on Long Island, out in the richest part in this country. The richest part in this country. We are surrounded by nothing but billionaires. And one of the billionaires was Bloomberg. And Bloomberg had the nerve to go on national television and tell them that the Shinnecock Indian Nation, disastrous. They are disastrous. They live terrible. They had nothing but alcoholism, drug addiction, and we have to help these people. Well, are they helping us? No. But he's got a house out there. He's living on stolen land. From 1640, the settlers came in one hand, like my sister Becky talks, one hand with a pen, the other hand with rum. And from 1640 until 1859, and then 1859, they stole 3,600 acres and moved us on to a peninsula, a swamp area, because they wanted us to die. They talk about slavery being the #1 in this country. No, it was genocide. Because they're trying to kill our people, and they're still trying to kill our people. And yes, I'm mad. I'm mad as hell.
I don't know if, I'm going to ask you, I don't know if as people testify like this, if a hand clap is what we ought to do, or if we should shout, somebody's hurting our brothers and sisters. It's gone on far too long, and we won't be silent anymore. Can we try that at the end of every testifier?
Good evening, everyone. My name is Stephanie. I'm a barista at the Meadow Street Starbucks in Ithaca, New York, and as of 3 days ago, I'm a member of Starbucks Workers United. All 3 Ithaca Starbucks stores voted nearly unanimously to join the union last Friday, making us the first city in the country to have 100% of Starbucks stores unionized. But we won't be the last. We're just getting started. I've never been a member of a labor union before. Like most of my coworkers, I'm living paycheck to paycheck. Many of us have second jobs, and it's still barely enough to get by. Meanwhile, the former CEO of Starbucks just got a $60 million golden parachute. It is our labor that has made Starbucks the multi-billion-dollar company it is, and all we are asking for is what we deserve. In return, we have been met with threats, bullying, harassment, and cuts in hours. Highly respected and competent workers have been fired simply for supporting the union. Where's their $60 million? The company is using the massive wealth that they have made off our labor to try to prevent us from exercising our fundamental right to unionize, and I find that deeply shameful. But it also gives me hope, because in spite of all the obstacles, we are still winning.
Yeah.
Our solidarity is stronger than their ill-gotten wealth. And if we can do it, if Amazon workers on Staten Island can do it, then other workers can too. The union has been our strength, but it goes beyond our fellow Starbucks workers. The broader community has had our backs, and this means so much to us. The Poor People's Campaign has been an incredible ally. particularly in fighting for justice for the fired Memphis 7. I feel so honored to be here tonight on behalf of my union and to be part of this movement. I want to thank Reverend Barber, Reverend Theo Harris, and everyone involved in the Poor People's Campaign for your moral leadership, and I hope to see you all in Washington on June 18th. Thank you so much, and solidarity forever.
Yeah! That's it! Somebody! Hurting our people! It's going on! And we won't be silent! Anymore! Give them a hand as they come.
Good afternoon, everyone. Greetings to all. My name is Brenda Temple. I am thrilled to be here with you today. I am a resident of Oceanside Houses in Far Rockaway, Queens. The Oceanside Houses is one of over 250 public housing developments in New York City, owned and operated by New York City Housing Authority, NYCHA. But I am speaking for all public housing throughout our country. I am an activist and work with the Committee for Independent Community Action under the direction of Dr. Lenore Villani, who believes in developing grassroots leadership so that ordinary people, poor people, can grow and develop as leaders. I am such a leader. I and the Committee for Independent Community Action are leading a New York City-wide petition campaign to demand Mayor Adam Adams to stop the privatization of public housing and support residents. We residents at HUD and NYCHA have let the conditions of our homes to over 500,000 New Yorkers, decay and rot and poison our people. NYCHA and the City of New York have been implementing a plan to give management of public housing over to private developers who will make money, a lot of money, on our backs. And we say people before profit. Privatization of public housing ends public housing as we know it. And that means a mass eviction, an exodus of hardworking poor people who have always been essential to this country, who is the backbone of this country. Who else would clean your parents' and grandparents' bed sores, take care of your children?
That's right.
Clean, cook, security, teachers' aides. I, myself, was a stenographer, but my teacher at college told me, you can't be that, because computers will take over your job. I ended up being a secretary in the medical office, but I'm not mad about it. I am disappointed of the lost opportunities and encouragement. But my community supports me. I love my community. And we ride and die with each other through thick and thin. The Poor People's Campaign is about a third reconstruction. We need decent housing, affordable housing to over 140 million of us Americans who can't afford to live in our own country. This is our right here in New York, and we demand decent public housing, we demand to manage our homes, and we demand democracy.
That's right. Somebody hurting our people, and it's gone on far too long, and we won't be silent anymore.
After working my whole life, I became disabled in 2019. And because I was unaware of the reality facing the 140 million people in this country who are living in poverty while working low-paying jobs, I thought there was a safety net. I reasoned with myself, having necessary surgery and becoming disabled will be okay because we're a compassionate country and we have a social safety net for the least of these in this country. I was not aware that more than 70% of households with disabled members living below the poverty line do not receive federal housing assistance. But I now know, because I was waiting for housing for 3 years. And it seems I am one of the lucky ones, only waiting 3 years for housing. There are still millions of people waiting for housing. Just look around, we can see them in every state. It is heartbreaking. And there are 140 million people who are just one emergency away from losing everything. The waiting list for housing anywhere is years long. What are we expected to do during those years? We must change policies and start funding a social safety net in a way that will make a difference. There are many people in every state doing good work to try and provide for those who find themselves homeless, but we need federal policies to change so that those groups can get funding that will support them in the work they do. Spending 52 cents out of every discretionary dollar on militarism and not even spending 1% of our gross national product on the people that make up this country is despicable.
That's it.
One of the basic human rights that we at the Poor People's Campaign are fighting for is housing. In every state, we see homelessness. We are veterans. We are people that do not have a monetary safety net to fall back on, and we are people who are disabled. What does it say about us? Please join us at the march in Washington on June 18th, 2022. I'll see you there.
Somebody hurting our people. That has gone on far too long. And we won't be silent anymore. Let's receive Reverend Liz P.O. Harris, our co-chair of the campaign.
States. This evening, speaking as a Christian preacher, a biblical scholar, a mom of 2 amazing New York City public school kids that are here at this mass meeting, a long-time anti-poverty activist, someone who has experienced poverty firsthand myself. I can think of nowhere more powerful to be than right at the center, the heart of Wall Street, the day after Palm Sunday, the anniversary of that original Moral Monday. Nowhere that freedom fighters should be turning over tables of injustice, disrupting, unsettling our complacent national life. Nowhere that the good news of living wages and health care and clean water and education and voting rights must be declared. Nowhere I would rather cry out, everybody's got a right to live. Somebody's been hurting our people. It's gone on far too long, and we won't be silent anymore. Being here on our march at this mass meeting reminds me of my favorite Bible passage from Luke, from the story of Palm Sunday, when that mighty mule train of freedom fighters, poor people and others hurt by empire, on their way to the center of political and economic power, on their way to declare no justice, no peace. What do we want? Health care. When do we want it now? What do we want? Clean air. When do we want it now? And as the story goes, some of the authorities start getting worried. What if this protest is sustained? What if these people continue to raise their voices and build power? They say to Jesus in Luke 19, "Teacher, order your disciples to stop." But he answered, "I tell you, if these were silent, the stones would shout out." Well, I've heard some shouting on these streets. And I'm hearing some in this sanctuary. The cries, the testimonies that we will not be silent anymore. And we will cry out. On June 18th, the very foundations of this nation we build a third Reconstruction. Last week was the anniversary of the crucifixion of Reverend Dr. King, who had a message for this moment. He said, "I believe there is only one dignified, sincere, effective method of working with the poor who exist from day to day in wretched and miserable conditions. You cannot work over them. You cannot work around them. You cannot work for them. You must work with them." And so we, the poor, the low-wage, the underinsured, clergy, young, old, queer, straight, we are gathered to demonstrate the power of the poor, banding together, demanding that this country change for the better, to call for a radical redistribution of political and economic power, to build the power to enact all our demands, and to rise together on June 18th. Because if there ever was a time to fight, it is now. We have mass abandonment amidst mass abundance. We have a mayor demolishing hundreds of homeless encampments. We have school children being sacrificed just so business leaders can have their parents serve them. We have brokers here on Wall Street bidding on food prices, as families in this country all over the world can't afford food. But it doesn't have to be this way. So New York, Massachusetts, Vermont, Rhode Island, Maine, these United States, are you ready? I want us marching into this sanctuary saying, we are ready. We are ready. We're ready. Here we come.
Come on, come on. Come on, come on. Come on, come on. Give me this mic, Mike. Come on.
We are ready. Here we come. We are ready. We are ready. We are ready. Here we come.
That's right. Now, Brother Mike, man, I'm going to love on you some. I'm a Pentecostal Southern preacher. You don't never know when I'm going to get up and grab this mic. So you got to be ready. You got to be ready. You got to be ready. Because here we come. Amen. We need to be, listen, y'all, but I want you to do something if we're ready. Look around and see who's not here. Because I don't want us to get fooled by the crowd. I want you to look around, because the question is, how many of you are going to make sure at least 5 impacted poor low-wealth people come with you? See, it's not enough for us to come. We must be true. And so I want you to look again at what power and pain looks like on this video.
We must be honest about the foundations of the political and economic systems we call America. I love America because of her potential, but I know that America will never even get close to being a more perfect nation until we are honest about the politics of rejection.
I want to tell you about some of the leaders who are building the Poor People's Campaign. Callie Greer from Selma, Alabama, who had to bury her daughter, Venus, because she didn't have health care.
I'm here today to share my daughter Venus' story. Venus discovered a small lump in her breast, and she wasn't insured. Venus had to be approved for every prescription and every piece of medical equipment that she needed. I'm standing here today in solidarity with the Poor People's Campaign because no one should have to bury their child in America because they don't have health care insurance.
I'm 46 years old. I've lived in poverty here in West Virginia every day of my life. And I'm working. I am working poor with a bachelor's degree. I'm doing the best I can with what I have.
I'm a second-generation fast food worker, and I've experienced the cycle of poverty firsthand. Growing up, I watched my mother endure long hours of back-breaking labor, doing everything she could to feed me and my sisters. My employer barely pays me enough to pay rent and utilities, let alone the medical expenses with my mother.
I worked 41 years in the coal mines. I have black lung, and it's just unfathomable what these poor coal miners have to go through in order to get what they have worked for and deserve.
I'm a Vietnam veteran. My only chance of going to college was joining the Army.
It was one thing to know that you didn't have water and you couldn't afford your water. It's a whole nother to find out that they shut off your entire community and none of you matter.
But when I lost my housing, health care, and income all at the same time, I was terrified, panicked.
Now I'm also a Kansas farmer's wife. Kansas farmers are committing suicide at a far greater rate than the national average.
Hi, my name is Pamela Rich. I'm from Downs County, Alabama. And I live in a mobile home with my 2 kids. And I got raw sewage. I don't have no money.
This is the largest encampment in Aberdeen. There's about 1,000 people in a town of 16,000 who are homeless.
In my community, we were all shut off for the day because none of us could afford our water bills. In the past, my family wasn't able to afford electricity in the winter. It was very hard on all of us.
But the indigenous people in the surrounding communities are being affected. We talk about health care. We talk about worrying about the environment, but yet when they're allowing open pit mines and letting it leak into the land, into the water, the high rate of cancer and the high bills of health is going to continue to raise because of corporations and greed and politicians that don't want to listen.
There's a new chemical covenant that's producing another carcinogen in our community. It's amazing. The people who just started dying of cancer.
This wall, this is sin of the highest order.
I put my life on the line at 17 years old to defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic. And right now when we're out, we have domestic enemies right here.
When there are 38 million poor children, when 60% of African Americans are poor, when 65% of Latinx are poor, when 40% of Asians are poor, when there are 67 million poor white people, we must say, this is not right.
Somebody's hurting our people, and it's gone on far too long, and we won't be silent anymore.
Our brothers and sisters are sleeping on the street. For a country this rich to have so many people poor, it's immoral and it's wrong.
Our backs are against the wall, and we got no choice but to push.
And together we will proclaim liberty throughout the land, for the enslaved, for the poor, and for us all.
Follow that breaking news in Albany, where a large group of protesters have moved into the street.
Washington Avenue between City Hall and Lark Street closed down.
Protesters with the Poor People's Campaign of Indiana.
2 o'clock on the East Coast, 2 o'clock in the middle, 2 o'clock on the West Coast. A wave, and the historians tell us it's never happened before.
Our communities, Muslim communities, who have joined the Poor People's Campaign, you can count on us.
Our democracy is in trouble. Our democracy is in trouble. And we come to demand.
Second warning.
I cannot stand here and claim to be a follower of Jesus Christ and be silent about the moral outrage that is going on in our country.
Because it's crucial that we make ourselves heard. No one is listening.
We are the Poor People's Campaign, a national call for moral revival. And we are here. We are poor. We are clergy. And we're here to say to our nation's capital and to the highest court of this land that everybody has a right to live. Everybody has a right to learn. Everybody has a right to love. Everybody has a right to living wages. Everybody has a right to vote. Everybody has a right to thrive in this society. Everybody say, oh! I believe that we will win. I believe that we will win. Freedom fighters, and you taught us how to fight.
The poor and their clergy. We read Article 6 of the Kentucky State Constitution that says we have a right to free assembly.
We are demanding that we stop the war on our poor.
It's times like these when throughout history prophets have to arise to sound the alarm.
Together until humanity is respected and children are protected and civil rights and labor rights and human rights are never neglected. I want you to know that when hands that once picked cotton join hands of Latino, join hands of progressive white, join faith hands and labor hands and Asian hands and Native American hands and poor hands and wealthy hands with a conscience and gay hands and straight hands and trans hands and Christian hands and Jewish hands and Muslim hands and Hindu hands and Buddhist hands. When we all get together, we are an instrument of redemption. When we join hands, we can revive and make sure that the promise of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness and equal protection under the law is never taken away from anybody. So I got a question. Are the rejected ready to revive and declare that this land is your land, this land is my land, this land is our land, and together from the State House to the White House, the rejected are going to demand that this nation never give up on being one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We've got to make sure that America sees and hears the faces. So Josh Cupula, pronouns they and them, is coming. Then Amy Ty is coming. And Valoni Golden are coming to share how they are impacted. And remember, we're talking to tens of thousands of people right now across this country for this broadcast, not just those of us in here. We're helping to mobilize them. We welcome your honesty story. Give them a hand as they come.
Hello, my name is Josh Coppola. I'm queer, I'm poor, and I'm also a tri-chair of the Maine Poor People's Campaign. I'm moved today to speak by both grief and joy. I'm saddened by this distorted moral narrative of Christian nationalism, and I'm grieving for the suffering of those that are still in the closet and those that are suffering from the impacts of exclusion, because this rhetoric can spur violence, and in many states, violent policy, and our siblings are already hurting. I grew up with that shame-mongering by politicians, public figures, and family members. Though I wish those days were past, my heart knows how those ideas divide families and keep poor people from recognizing their shared interest. How much longer do we LGBTQ plus folks have to start over, face homelessness, trauma, addiction, abusive situations with belonging and safety so far out of reach? It ain't right. The truth is, their distorted moral narrative is what's deepening the suffering in this country and making us all less secure. And if division is what they seek, then what we need to do is come together. And that's why I'm moved by joy today. And that's why I'm getting all my people to the Moral March in DC and that mass assembly. Because I love myself and my community, it's time to have a meeting. Because somebody's been hurting our families and dividing our families, it's time to have a meeting. I'll see you all and yours in DC on June 18th.
I'm a single mom, raised by another single mom. I'm a teacher, I'm a counselor, and I'm a friend to all. And I'm an activist. Perhaps most importantly, though, I'm a human being in a society that is on the verge of collapse. A society plagued by oppression and injustice. So many nights I wake up with my heart pounding because I cannot imagine what kind of future my 16-year-old son will have or not have because of climate devastation. Every day I see and feel the toll of systemic racism and injustice on my loved ones, knowing that people out there won't stop at anything just because they don't like the way I look is terrifying. Witnessing and experiencing the injustice and violence committed against us, poor people, Black, brown, and indigenous people every day is both exhausting and gut-wrenching. Our society's collective mental health is a disaster. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. had a dream. He united us across time and space to dream of a better world. All my life, I've wished that I could have been in Washington, D.C., standing up for civil rights and equality, standing with Dr. King to demand an end to poverty and greed, hatred, and war. We still have a long road ahead of us to make this dream come true. But I'm here today because I still believe in his dream, and I'm not giving up on it. And this is why I will be in Washington on June 18th, hopefully with all of you around the whole country, to demand our country's pledge of liberty and justice for all be a true pledge and not a false promise. This is a chance of our lifetime because this is the moment we change history.
From with the Vermont Workers Center and the Vermont Poor People's Campaign, but I became an expert in poverty right on these very streets. In the shadow of obscene wealth, amidst headquarters and institutions that built their wealth on the backs of our class, and then turned right around and waged an all-out war, both chemical and economic, on those very same people. Having experienced everything that poverty had to offer here in New York, I still loved it. I fought so hard to stay here. Like everything from incarceration to a physical illness that almost took my life. I still love the city. I resorted to sleeping in the streets. I was priced out by the insane hurdles that you have to go through here to access affordable housing, transportation, healthy food without having to travel to the good neighborhood. Thinking there was a geographic solution to poverty, I set out all across the United States, moving from New York to Florida to Connecticut, now to Vermont, and there is none. What I found was the cruel manipulation of the poor taking the very same face all over our country. Literal famine and slavery are alive and well, y'all, in the richest country in the world. If it wasn't just us in the Bronx being pressed, black and brown people in the Bronx, if white people are struggling just as hard in other places, then that meant it just wasn't me. That means something was systemic. That means something had to change. We had to get together. The ruling class doesn't want us to strategize across lines of division, because our strength, the strength of our class, of working people, is what powers this machine. The people of Vermont, just like the people of New York, just like the people of Massachusetts and Rhode Island and Carolina and Venezuela, all of our demands are the same. We demand healthy food, we demand housing, we demand quality health care, we're tired of the yo-yos, the switcheroos, every kind of game that they've been playing on us, all those okey-dokes. I'm mobilizing with my people in Vermont. We're coming out to Washington on June 18th to tell people we're done.